Morning, everybody. Today's lesson is going to walk you through the main work that you're going to be doing for this week. And this is the week beginning the 30th of March. The first thing that you will have done is been in the stream where you'll have accessed this video. And if you go into the Classwork section, you will see that there is the work that's been set for you for the 30th of March. Now, if we have a little look at this work, you will find one thing, that there's a document that outlines the work that I'd like you to do, and that all of this work should be completed in the virtual Jota. And if you are in one of Mr. Anderson's classes, then please complete the virtual Jota here. And if you're in my class, then do all of your work in this virtual Jota. If you have a real problem using the virtual Jota, then you can, if you wish, attach the assignments in the normal way, where you can upload a document, maybe take a photograph of what you've done if you've done it in your Jota. But it's much easier for us if you're able to complete it in the virtual Jota, and therefore try to do that if possible. Right, let's get on with the lesson. Let's have a little look at the work that you've been set for this week. We're now going to start looking at the idea that populations might need to be controlled. Last week, we were thinking about the fact that populations were growing very fast. This has got a lot to do with the fact that birth rates in some parts of the world are quite high, and the human race is now starting to live longer, so death rates are falling. Clearly, we're reaching the point where we're almost at 8 billion people, and many countries have had to think about trying to control this, most notably China. So your first task is going to be to find out about what China's one-child policy is and write about it after you've written the heading Controlling Population Growth in your virtual Jota. If we have a little look at the link, it'll take you to the Britannica Encyclopedia, and you'll not only find a little introduction to the one-child policy, which is here, but if you scroll down, you will find actually what they did. So the task involves you having to write about the things that were enforced in order to make sure people only had one child. So how did they make it happen? How did they ensure that each family could only have one pupil? So once you've read through that down to this point, you'll be able to have an understanding of how the one-child policy worked. Okay, now once you've got the idea that that China had a one-child policy, let's have a little think about, did it work? So you've got this task which involves you looking at this graph, and we've got some questions which will involve you having to describe China's change, comparing China and India, and suggesting whether it worked or not based on the graph. And when you describe graphs, you should give numbers and dates. So let's have a little look at this graph. Okay, and if we scroll down, this is the graph I want you to copy into your virtual Jota. So here we can see back in 1950, China had a much bigger population than India. It had almost 600 million people. It then started to rise rapidly through to the 1980s. Now, the one-child policy was introduced in 1980, and we can see it kept rising. So you might at that point say it wasn't working. But unfortunately, China had a lot of people in its population who still had to have their one child, so it kept growing for a while. What we can see, though, is from 1990, after it was at 1.2 billion, it starts to slow down, and it's expected to peak at around 2025. So in about 5 years' time, China will stop growing as a country. At that point, it's going to stay stable for about 10 years and then start to fall. And by the year 2100, they're expecting it to drop down to a much lower level. So that's the first thing. Other key thing here, so it was scrolling through the different graphs, is comparing it to India. Well, obviously, India was growing a bit slower in the early days, but has now accelerated at the same speed as China. And actually, whilst China's slowed down after about 1990, India has kept growing and will overtake China by about 2025. It will continue to grow to a much bigger population of about 1.7 billion. meaning it will become the biggest country the world has ever seen by about 2060, and then it will start to slow down. So what you might say is, has China's population one-child policy worked? Well, yes, it probably has. It's slowed down, whereas the reason we know that is India doesn't have one, and it's continuing to grow at a much more rapid rate. So that's us thinking about China versus India and the changes in the population of the two countries. Let's go and have a little look at the task 5. We're now going to think about, did it work? The effects of the one-child policy? Well, obviously the first effect is the fact that it's worked. China's population has slowed down. However, when you watch these 2 video links and then look at this website, you will find that there have been a lot of unfortunate negative consequences of this policy that the Chinese government at the time never thought would happen or didn't realize would happen. So what you have to do is watch the videos, look at the web link, and then discuss the effects, whether they are positive, because an effect can be positive, and there are in those videos some positive effects, as well as negative. And then write up 4 descriptive effects. And then at the end of the week, by the end of the 3rd of March, 3rd of April, sorry, Mr. Anderson and I will have a look and be able to give you some marking feedback to the work that you've done. So good luck, and when you've completed your work, that's it all for geography till after Easter, and we'll see you with more work after the Easter holidays.